I've heard some talk about this phenomena, but it is. I don't know that it's really necessarily counterintuitive, but how did QAnon, which started with Trump supporters and involves Trump, how did it migrate, or did it migrate, or did it just reach this community through a totally different track?
It's something called pastel QAnon or QAnon light, and it's a type of QAnon recruitment that is specifically aimed at women and is generally perpetrated through Instagram and other social media type platforms. So not the types of QAnon followers you would see going to the message boards and reading all the Q drops, the clues that are released or were released, but people who are finding their way to the ideology through these kind of side doors, like Instagram hashtags and Facebook groups where people are sharing links and encouraging others to educate themselves. And these types of groups are very active in the wellness community, especially because during the pandemic, a lot of those physical spaces, meditation rooms, sound healing rooms, yoga studios were closed, and online was the only way that people had to stay in touch with each other.
And so I want to get to sort of like, what is it about this community that might make it sort of right? But you said, it's coming through hashtags. Like, who's driving it? I mean, I understand that it's it's a slightly different variant, if you will, and so it's sort of being transmitted through different vectors. But who's pushing it to that community? Like where and why, and how did someone think, I'm gonna go there? I mean, I'm using metaphor of a virus, and on some level, like a virus doesn't know where it's going, but it finds the sort of like, I don't know, it runs downhill, I guess.
The receptive host, right? Yeah, it finds.
But in this instance, like, it doesn't is it somebody just going out there and going like, I'm going to do hashtags with sunsets and hashtags with football games, and I'm going to do hashtags with, like, are they just, it's like, who's doing this?
Yeah, it's a great question. And it's actually, as with all things Q, there's still kind of like a layer of murkiness about it where it's not always clear who is pulling the levers behind all of it. But for people who watch the New Age world, that's kind of people who keep an eye on conspiracy theories, yoga teachers, and other people who've really spoken out against this type of thing. They say that it's clear that there's been some kind of a concerted effort to target people in this community, partly because a lot of the language that the wellness community uses is kind of akin to the language that QAnon uses, including the phrase the Great Awakening, which people might have heard of, referring to the idea that there's going to be this point where the country wakes up and realizes that, Democrats who are also cannibalistic pedophiles are controlling the levels of government. Great Awakening is something that's also discussed in yogic communities, as an idea of kind of spiritual ascension, of kind of getting a better grasp on the internal balanced self. And then the fifth dimension is another one, kind of all the New Age of Aquarius type of behavior. It actually lines up very neatly. So one of the theories is that this community became a fat target for QAnon because so much of the language already felt familiar to people, so that the recruiting can be done through these pathways that people might already be talking about, but in a different sense, or already kind of interested in that type of language, if that makes sense.
It does make sense. And it occurs to me as you say that it's conceivable that the language itself was lifted from that community. I mean, we should, I guess, maybe we should reiterate that QAnon is not real, and that someone constructed these stories. They were not, nobody reported on and maybe we should go through some of the sort of the main themes about QAnon. But it's conceivable that the person who decided to sort of release this hoax or whatever it is just shopped around and found this language and borrowed it from the spirituality wellness community, and the spirituality wellness community is sort of reappropriating it.
right? The reappropriation. It's really hard to say. And this is something that researchers are struggling with when we talk about quantifying kind of the spread of QAnon in this community. It's sometimes difficult to know if someone is talking about the Great Awakening, or if they're talking about the fifth dimension, which is another thing that you hear in spiritual communities, or if they're even talking about the idea of being a light worker. That's one of the phrases that pops up in QAnon, is this idea that Trump is a light worker who's going to save the country from this grip of evil, right? But light worker is also a phrase that you hear in spiritualism, talking about people who are kind of battling evil, being a force for good. And so when you see those phrases used online, it's sometimes hard to know whether the person who's doing it is like overtly Q, if they have no idea what's going on and they're using it in some other setting, or if they're somewhere in the middle of that spectrum, all the way from kind of full extremist to clueless. And it's to pin it down exactly where each person falls on that spectrum.
And I imagine that ambiguity actually adds to the transmissibility, if you will, because people can read into it and see something that is shrouded in secrecy that is in fact not even addressing what they think it's addressing.
That's absolutely right. And this is a community that the New Age world, health, wellness, spirituality, all of that is a community that has been primed for many years to look for hidden patterns and meaning. The idea that there's more at play in the world than what meets the naked eye, and that nothing happens meaninglessly, that everything happens for a reason. So those are the same kind of beliefs that underpin conspiracy theories, the idea that you have to search behind the curtain for the person pulling the levers. And so it very neatly meshes. It's surprising if you haven't found your way into this community before, but once you get there, it's pretty clear that a lot of the rhetoric and the views are actually quite similar.
Well, let's talk about, because I think we throw around Q, and I'm not sure that everyone knows what it is, like what the Q canon is, I guess, in terms of when people say that they're trafficking in QAnon conspiracies, like what exactly are these conspiracies? I have to admit, too, that it wasn't until probably the past week that I found out about the secretions that supposedly come from children. I'll let you explain that.
Adrenochrome. I don't even know that we have enough time, or that don't need to give credence to all these topics, right? But basically the main assertion of QAnon, although it has so many tentacles now that it's actually, you sometimes see people glomming onto one area of it and not necessarily the whole belief system. For example, the anti-vaccine stuff is very active in the wellness community, but some of the other tenets, not so much. But basically Q has asserted in the past that it alleges that there's a cabal of satanic, cannibalistic pedophiles, many of whom are Democrats and Hollywood elites, that are running a global sex trafficking ring and conspired against President Trump while he was in office.
Let me just stop you here too. Did some of this emanate out of Pizzagate?
Yes. Yes,
okay.
Pizzagate is it started off as a separate thing, as my understanding, and then it kind of got absorbed into QAnon, which is another thing that you see with Q, is that it kind of shifts with the times, right? So as the pandemic came around, suddenly a lot of Q-oriented language is about public health guidance and masks and vaccines, just as during Pizzagate, it became about that narrative. So it's always hard to, it's difficult to pin them right on the card, because the conspiracies and the narrative shift to fit the news of the day.
So the core of QAnon is that there's this satanic cult of pedophiles that are commingled with the Democratic Party and, of course, the celebrities. Trump came to office as some type of almost undercover operation to roll this massive network up. The deep state, of course, was protecting this network, and so they were trying to attack Trump from the inside. And this Q person, explain, I think I tried to explain, or I did try to explain, but what is Q? Where did that come from? The Q part.
Q is someone who has, on these message boards, has claimed to be a high-level government official with what's called Q clearance, a specific type of security clearance, who has access to classified information that involves the Trump administration and the enemies of the Trump administration. And this person has alleged in the past that there will be something called the storm, a day of reckoning of types when thousands of people who are in this cabal worldwide, but particularly in the United States, this alleged cabal, will be arrested and the truth will come to light.
Hi, I'm Sam Seder. You can watch the rest of this interview and more on our Peacock show, which streams at 5 p.m. weekdays on The Choice from Peacock TV.